Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Ella and I'm delighted to be joined by Alexandra and Neil, who will be talking to you about Modernize your Oracle workflows to Azure SQL. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC21. Remember to check out the Resource Centre. The Resource Centre is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars and how-to videos. And join us next week for Controlling Your Enterprise Mail Flow with Dave Stork. And thank you to our webinar sponsors, Docs42 and Point Fire.
Hey you! In the session you will see all about the great options of the Microsoft technologies. But what about generating documents in the Microsoft ecosystem? Like quotes, reports, emails, PowerPoints and others. The challenges usually are many different data sources, an intuitive design in Microsoft Office, and of course generating the documents where the user needs them. In SharePoint, the Power Platform, Teams or Dynamics. Docs42 can do all of it. Try now yourself.
Hi, I'm Martin from Point Fire. This year I was hoping to entice you with a booth, games, prizes, giveaways. Instead, we have this short video to show you how we make the multilingual page publishing feature even better. It's so easy, the demo only takes a few seconds.
With SharePoint's new feature, your staff still has to translate each page manually. By adding the Point Fire translator, the pages get translated automatically for your approval. Go to try.pointfire.com for a free trial or contact us for a demo.
It's been a busy week at ESPC here, as we've shared a lot of exciting announcements. ESPC will return to an in-person event next year in Copenhagen. We've also launched a brand new conference, European Power Platform Conference, and to celebrate this, we are releasing a 30% discount code. To find out more information, please visit the link on the screen and register for your discount code. We also have our call for speakers open, so if anyone would like to submit to speak at European Power Platform Conference, please do before the 18th of November. If you have any questions, please type them into the question window. We will take questions throughout and at the end of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and you'll be notified by email when it is available. Now I'm going to pass you over to our presenters Neil and Alexandra today.
Thank you very much, Ella, and hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today we are going to cover Oracle to Azure SQL migration. I know this is not a simple equation, it's something that we can fix in a few minutes, but we do hope to show some, to share some of the knowledge and help you accelerate your migrations. My name is Alexandra Chorta. I'm a program manager in Azure Data looking over heterogeneous migrations. And today I'm accompanied by my colleague Neil, who is going to walk you through the first part of the presentation.
Thanks, Alexandra. Hi, I'm Neil. I'm a program manager for Microsoft, and I look into the heterogeneous migration, which includes Oracle to SQL workload. Can I get a prompt to share my screen? I didn't see it, so I'll start doing it. Yeah.
What about now?
Yep.
Oh yeah, perfect. I see it.
So, is it possible to hide? Okay. So what's the agenda for today? Today, I'm going to talk about what are the key migration drivers for organization or end users to migrate from Oracle to SQL. Now, when we talk about the target platform, there are a plethora of choices. You have SQL, you have Postgres, you have Cosmos, you have so many other options. So why SQL? Why customers or users are preferring SQL than any other workload? how you can do the database migration. So what is the entire migration journey looks like. And when we talk about migration of database is just one part of it, right? So at the end goal for customers or organization is move an application which has Oracle as a backend and migrate to SQL. So we will talk about not only the database, how you can go ahead and migrate the application and make it compatible with SQL. And at the end, we will just cover a little bit on the roadmap. What are the new things we are building? What are the cool capabilities you will see in the next coming months so that you can start trying out our new experience as well. So what are the key drivers for customers or organizations moving from Oracle to SQL or moving to cloud first? The first is in a study which was done, like 20% of the customer who embrace cloud, they are able to move faster and they are able to adopt and accelerate their innovation, which is twice as faster than other organizations. And when we talk about the cloud migration, it is not just only the cloud, public cloud. It can be in combination of private with public, and which we call it a hybrid cloud. It can be an on-premise non-cloud, and off-premise non-cloud, and private cloud as well. So we have a lot of offerings today, and we can see customer choosing from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service, and these are the key two offerings which we have today from the SQL side. So what are the key migration drivers? There are basically what we have found in today, where there are 6 major reasons why customers or end users or organizations are planning to move from Oracle to any other workload. The first is the cost optimization. Now, it's being a cloud platform, you have the whole capex versus opex, where you can do pay as you go, and also you are trying to use a scale which is required. You don't have to do an upfront commitment to kind of adopt an Oracle server or any kind of hardware. So the upfront one-time commit, that actually drastically reduces. The second is the licensing. Now, when we move into the Azure SQL, the licensing is very simple. You just pay as you go model, and there is no feature-based licensing, which comes as a native in the Oracle, so which makes it's a lot of complexity there. And the third benefit which you have is, as a part of cost optimization, is you are not worried about the hardware, because the underlying hardware, you want to get rid of this cost. And when you're moving to an Azure cloud, whether it's SQL and infrastructure service or platform as a service, you don't have to worry about the hardware cost and maintenance. So that's first motivation factor as a cost optimization. The second is applications are becoming more microservices, more cloud first, and SQL PaaS services, and is one of the kind of first-class citizen in the cloud environment. So SQL managed instance, SQL DB, and that gives a very, very kind of easy way of migrating from a heavy monolithic on-premise to a more microservice and scalable cloud solution. Performance improvements, our products keep on evolving. We are building AI-driven performance capabilities. We are bringing more new security-based performance capabilities. So we're making it more robust and adopting more and more new performance capabilities there. And the last is about reducing the administrative headcount. Now, because these are all managed services, to maintain and manage, whether it's patching, whether it's backup, all those activities can be simplified, and you can reduce your administrative overheads. And these are some of the common migration drivers for end users. Now, keeping Oracle as a source, we have multiple targets. So we can choose Oracle for Postgres, SQL, and the SQL comes in various flavors: SQL Server, SQL Database, SQL MI, or SQL on a VM as well. And then finally, if you have a warehouse workload which you want to migrate, it's Azure Synapse Analytics as well. Now, all this detailed information, if you go to our site, databasemigration.microsoft.com, you can go ahead, get this hub page, and then you can navigate and get more detail about each and every migration process. Now, while today's session is focused on Oracle, but as database migration guide, it is a hub where you can also get information of SQL to SQL, DBT to SQL, Sybase to SQL, and so on, other different platforms as well. So why SQL? There are a few key benefits of migrating to SQL. The first is breakthrough productivity and performance. So we have done a lot of TPC benchmarking. We come as one of the most performant databases. We have performance capabilities like auto tuning, query store, auto parameterizations, and we are evolving and making our product more and more scalable with auto scaling capability as well. The second is the security. We have various security components catering to GDPR requirements as well. We have dynamic data masking, always encrypted, the row level security, and so many. With all this security and the performance capability, we are also ensuring that all the services, whether it's a database backup, maintenance, scalability, or performance, we are trying to build in intelligence and make it more AI-driven decisions and simplifying the man work to do the performance tuning. And with all this, and to have a seamless and a competitive TCO pricing, where we give you a lot of options. First is you can do a reserved instances where you can pay, you can do a 1 year or 3 year reservation. You can get massive discounts. Along with that, we have Azure Hybrid Benefit, where if you have software assurances, you can go ahead and apply those software assurance benefits on your Azure SQL database and SQL MI, and you don't have to incur any additional licensing costs. So you have the ability to bring your own license. So with this, on understanding the benefit of migrating SQL and why customers and users are planning to migrate from Oracle to SQL, there are a few migration phases or the journey someone has to undertake to have a successful Oracle to SQL migration. So the first, we say it as a pre-migration. In the pre-migration, what you do is you discover your Oracle estate or an Oracle instance, where you run certain Oracle inventory scripts, where you understand the schemas, your inventory, the versions and capabilities, and to get a very high level overview, like what's your database size, what are the features you are using in your database, and so on. The first is more of a discovery. Once you have discovered your Oracle instance or Oracle database and you have a very high level information, the next is the assessment. In the assessment, what we do is we connect to an Oracle database. You can pick and choose the schemas you want to migrate and do a full code assessment. In the code assessment, we identify what are the low, medium, complex migration. So some can be migrated or converted automatically, and wherever it's possible to migrate automatically, we kind of get those solutions in our tool as well. And those where we need manual intervention or manually you have to go and modify the changes, we not only call those sections out, we also provide this remediation and mitigation plan for those manual activities. So the assessment gives you the effort estimate to perform this kind of code conversion. We also kind of give you what are the errors, what are the various warnings, and what can be done automatically and wherever you need manual intervention. Once you go understand the assessment, then you go to the conversion phase. In the conversion, you can go ahead and use what is automatically converted and then make some manual changes which cannot be converted by our tool set automatically. And this can be because of feature gaps, because of the behavior changes, and because the way some features behave in SQL or statement behave in SQL might not be same as it behaves in Oracle. With this pre-migration done, where you have not only discovered and assessed, you have converted to a SQL compatible schema. The next is the migration phase. Now, in the migration phase, the first is you actually go ahead and migrate the schemas. The schemas might include tables, procedure, functions, views, and so many other things. So you go ahead and migrate the database objects and schemas. Once you have the empty shell database with all the objects and the data schemas, the next is migrating the data, and we call it a data movement. And you can do the data movement using our tool, SQL Server Migration Assistant, or you can use SSI's Azure Data Factory or any third-party services. Now, once you have migrated the data and you have validated the data, the next is cutover. In the cutover, what you do is you switch your production from Oracle to the SQL. So that's the cutover journey. And after the cutover, we understand that just migrating is not enough. There is a continuous cycle of optimization where you remediate your application, you optimize your code, and you run your functional and performance tests and continue this process till you have stabilized your workload. Now, if you look at it, the SSMA, and today we are going to focus a lot on SSMA in the first half, which is our tool of choice for this kind of migration. SSMA can do assessment, can do convert, can do migrate, and also it can participate in the Oracle data validation and post-migration activity. So as a part of this whole migration journey, as I talked to the pre-assessment, in the pre-migration, the pre-migration is divided into assess and convert, and the tool, as you see, is SQL Server Migration Assistant. And what it does, if you look at it, it has three sections. The first section, it gives you a schema object tree where you have the schema name. Under that, you have procedures, tables, views, and so on. And you can further drill down an n number of levels. Like from tables, you can go to a table names. From the table, you can go to indexes, constraints, and so on. So that's the kind of the schema tree on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you would see there is a conversion statistics. Now, we actually show a graphical representation. So we have what can be converted and what cannot be converted, and give you a percent ratio what we are able to convert successfully. And at the bottom, you would see the various errors and warnings. So if you look at here, we have 4 errors and 5 warnings, and what those warning means, what those error means. And at the end, you would see the effort required, like 0.3 hours or 0.6 hours, the effort required to mitigate these kind of errors and fix it and make it compatible to SQL. And after, when you make all this, all these things at the top, you will see there is something in the red, which is 1.3 hours, and it gives you the overall effort required to migrate and convert this schema and make it SQL compatible. Now, once you have done the conversion, the next is about migrating the schema. Now, if you look at it, this SSMA gives you an option where you can go ahead, right-click, and say, "Hey, migrate data." And post migrating the schema, you actually go ahead and migrate the data. And with all these capabilities, you have this one-stop place called SSMA. And what I would do next is give you a walkthrough of this demo of SQL Server Migration Assistant. So what I have is, let me go ahead. I'm going to create a new project. And when I go ahead and create a new project in the SQL Server Migration Assistant, I just go ahead and give a name. So I'm going to say demo 20th October, right? And then you choose the location where you want to create the project, and then migrate. You can choose the target which you want to use for your migration. It can be SQL 2000, 14, 16, 19. It can be a SQL PaaS service like SQL Database or SQL Managed Instance or Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So I'm going to, for this demo, I'm going to choose SQL Database. And then I click OK. Once I go ahead and click OK, you would see that it creates an empty project. Just give me a minute. Just, oops. Yeah. So it creates an empty project. Now, the first thing which you have to, first step, I would say, is to connect to an Oracle. That is your source. When I select connect to Oracle, you have various mode of connecting to Oracle, the standard mode where you give the server name, the username and password. If you are familiar and want to use TNS names, so you can choose the TNS name mode and give the TNS string. TNS details, and then the connection string where you can create the whole connection string and pass it to the Oracle instance. For the simplicity of this demo, I'm going to choose standard mode. In the standard mode, I choose the server name, I choose the server port, the Oracle SID, I'm selecting the default, which comes as XE, and username and password. So now you would see that it tries to connect to the Oracle instance, and then it gives the list of schemas the Oracle has identified, this tool has identified. In this demo, I'm going to just select HR. That is the sample schema I'm going to use for demo. But based on your application, you can go ahead and pick and choose whichever database schemas you need. Once you select the schema which you want to access and convert, you go ahead and click OK. So when you click on OK, what it does, it loads the schema metadata, and it connects to the Oracle server and then loads the schema information and creates a very high level metadata on your workstation where you are running this tool SQL Server Migration Assistant. So it takes maybe a minute. And while this loading is going on the bottom, you see there is a progress bar which says loading heavy objects. So it's loading packages, so loading tables, views, and you can understand the progress it tries to make for each and every activity during this metadata creation. While this is going on, is there any question, Ella, which we can take it now?
No question at the moment.
Okay, perfect. So once it loads all the packages and the output is done, you will see that on the top you have the Oracle instance or the database, then you have the schema, and in this case it's HR schema which I have selected. Now when you expand the HR schema, you would see there are a few procedures. It got 4 procedures. When you have tables, it has few tables and views and so on. You can also go and see the details. So when I go ahead and choose this table, a particular table, it gives me a lot more information, like the column names, what is the SQL statement, the data type mapping. So we map the databases, like for example, character is mapped to character varying to varchar, double. So for example, in Oracle, you have double. The equivalent in SQL is SQL float 53. You can also edit this data type mappings, right? Then you can go ahead and select the properties. So you can navigate and get more information about the schema objects. You can also expand. So and then it gives you, hey, under this you have indexes, triggers, and so on. And on the top, if you have procedures which you also want to migrate, if you click on the procedure, it gives you the statement which is in the Oracle at this point. It gives you the parameters, what are the input parameters, and what are the different type mappings, very similar what we have seen in the tables as well. So we have discovered the Oracle instance. We have kind of understood the schemas. The next is do an assessment. For the assessment in this demo, I'm more interested in the HR. So I click the HR and say create report, right? So let me go ahead and create a report. So what it would do if you look at the bottom, it starting conversion, analyzing metadata. It analyzes each and every schema objects in that particular schemas. Now with this, I have assessed the stored procedures. So if you look at it, I said, hey, this stored procedure, this is the source, and this is how the schema looks like in the target, right? So it has converted all this, if you look at all these input parameters to the @ parameters in SQL and made a fully kind of compatible conversion of the procedure. Now, while you can do the changes at the object level, I can also go ahead and make at the one full schema and say, hey, go ahead and say create report. In this, what it does is it will go ahead and assess each and every objects under the schema. So I can go ahead and target a specific object, and also I can go ahead and target particular schema, multiple schemas, and kind of create a large assessment report for all the activities. So if you look at the bottom now, it is loading tables, loading departments, it's analyzing all the tables. Once it completes the tables, it will start analyzing the procedures and views and so on. So it takes, again, a few seconds to assess the various schema objects. In production, it might take longer time based on your number of objects if you have. So for example, if you have 1,000 procedures and 1,000 tables, it will certainly take more time compared to a database which has 5 tables and 10 procedures. So it is not size dependent, it's more on the number of objects which you have in your schema workload. So with this assessment, which is almost done, I am going to take, yes. So you get a quick synopsis. In the quick synopsis, you say, hey, how many it was able to automatically convert, 24, 5 have warnings, and 5 objects have warnings. And then if you further scroll down, it gives you the success ratio for each and every database objects. Like for procedure, it's a 50-50, 2 objects it could successfully migrate and 2 has warnings. Similarly, tables, we have 19 success and 2 which has some warnings and so on. When you go to the warning sections, you would get the warning in detail. It gives what is the issue like, and under the issue, it also gives you the affected object, like conversion from number data type can cause data loss. I can select the table, and the moment I click on this, it takes me to the table where I have seen these issues. Similarly, if I have the view, it not only gives me the source Oracle statement, it gives me the relevant SQL, and it gives me a warning like, hey, attribute with read-only cannot be converted. So with as there are only warnings will not be a blocker. That means you will be able to migrate without any issues, but there might be behavior change. Whereas when you are doing the errors, you might have to go ahead and fix those. So with this assessment you have done, the next step is to do a conversion. And to convert and then migrate, what I do is I connect to a SQL database, so which is going to be act as my destination. So I connect to my SQL target or SQL destination. Once I have connected, I can see that, hey, I have an Oracle migrate, right? And then what I do is HR and say, hey, convert schema. And then after it converts schema, you would see that it has gone ahead and applied these changes on my local database. So this is done on my local database. So it doesn't actually convert and apply on my actual database. It actually just goes ahead and make a local copy of the changes. Now, if you want to modify any changes, you will be able to make changes. You will be able to modify any of the code which you want to make it compatible. So you have the ability to modify the code which you want. Once you have modified all this in your local project and you are happy with the overall kind of schema compatibility, the next step is synchronize with database. When you do a synchronize with database, that's when the modification which you have done in the project, it gets synchronized with the actual database. So it goes ahead, it prepares it, and then it says, hey, I'll go ahead and apply these changes. So and with this, it actually loads the changes from your local to the actual SQL databases. So this is how you migrate the schema. So what we have done so far is we analyze the schema and then we go ahead and convert the schema. We convert the schema in our project, make it compatible, and ensure you are happy with all the changes. And once you are satisfied with all your changes, you actually commit those changes in your database, and that's exactly what we are trying to do at this point. So this will take few minutes. It's loading the tables, loading the errors. Yeah, so now the synchronization is complete. So with the synchronization is complete, what it has done is it has replicated all the schema changes on your Oracle to the SQL database. After you have made the schema changes, the next is to migrate the data. And we also have this migrate data option. So you click on the migrate data. Credentials. You provide the target credentials. And what it does, it starts migrating the data, starting database migration. It's migrating one table at a time. You see employees, regions, and all that. And then it gives you a report where you have the HR jobs, departments, and so on with the migrated data and the success rate. To validate this, what we can do is we can go to the Oracle migrate. We have the tables. And you see the tables which are there, right click and say select top 1,000 rows, and you see that we have the records available in SQL. So this is how you start the assessment, you do the conversion, and you do the migrate. Now, for large data sets, which might be hundreds of GBs or terabytes, you might consider using Azure Data Factory, SSIS packages, or maybe third-party tools for doing kind of large data set migrations. So that's the overall summary of how we can do from the assessment, convert, and migrate. With this, I will pause for questions. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Alexandra to talk about the next interesting topics about the code assessment, the console API, console options, and the latest roadmap.
I have one question that I would like to ask from someone. It says the Microsoft docs talk about the SSMA components on the SQL Server extension pack. Is this required, or is this possible to install on an Azure SQL database?
The extension pack is it's basically there are two things. We have some server-side migration, and that's when you would need those extension packs. And so you should be able to use it if required. But it's not like a must. Like it is only when you want to do a server-side migration, that's when you would need the extension pack.
Okay, perfect. Someone else said, should we use Microsoft Database Experimentation Assistant to test a database?
Microsoft Database Experimentation Assessment, that's more for the load testing. So if you want to kind of like run like hundreds of queries and see how the system behaves under load. So it's more of a load and stress testing tool. So post migration, if you want to kind of simulate load and test it, yes, you can go ahead and do it. But for the conversion and migration, SSMA is the right tool of choice. Data experimentation is more for the load and performance testing.
Okay,
and just
perfect.
to add on top of that, the database experimentation assistant can be used, actually can replay workloads coming from SQL Server to SQL Server. So it doesn't have the ability to capture and replay workloads from Oracle to heterogeneous sources. So yeah, definitely you can do that, but in the context of a SQL to SQL migrations.
Perfect. So will I pass over to you now, Alexandra, for your bit?
Oh, thank you very much, Ella. Thank you very much, Neil. So let me share my screen so I can take over for the second part of the presentation. I think we are just in time. Just gonna hide this one and then slideshow. Okay. From current slide, we should be good to go. I'm just gonna hide this one for a moment here. So we've talked about SQL Server Migration Assistant, which is a conversion tool. And we saw all the options and how you can actually move through your conversion process using the interface. While SQL Server Migration Assistant is a great tool when we are doing database to database migrations, it can become a little bit challenging if I'm looking to do things at scale. So if I want to create conversion or assessment project of scale, or if I want to assess different Oracle databases. And in order to do this, I would like to introduce the SSMA console, which is a command line application. It's a separate application. It comes with the installation of SQL Server Migration Assistant, and you can use it in order to automate the conversion and migration phase. So is it one-on-one with what we can do interface? Well, not really at this point. So we cannot run the tester in the console line, but we can do everything related to assessment, conversion, and migration. It's also another benefit of SSMA console is the fact that you can provide an input folder if you have ad hoc PLSQL queries. We all know that usually, that depending on your application type and depending on your workloads, the logic can sometimes reside in the database on the client side or be divided among these two. So we have a case where customers have PLSQL queries coming from within their application, or they have tons of PLSQL queries written in certain reports or other client utilities. So this is where SSMA console is really useful, because you can leverage that, specify the folder from where you want those to be picked up, and it will automatically convert those statements for you. So you don't need to add them one by one in the interface. Neil talked actually briefly about data movements. So we know conversion is one of the most important parts, because there has to be a lot of work involved in sometimes remediating the things that we can't automatically convert, or even redesigning some things where we don't have one-to-one parity. When we migrate from one database engine to the other, or even to from a source code to from a type of code to a different type of code, there are always things that have to be manually handled, depending on the complexity of your schemas and complexity of objects that you invoke. So part of the effort goes there for the manual remediation. Once the schema is deployed and you have the context or the shell of your database, then you need to think about data movement. And I would split this in two main categories. There are workloads or system where we can do just an offline data movement. It can take 3-4 days. It doesn't really matter. There is no critical requirements to have a continuous sync. And there are systems where on top of the initial data pump or initial data sync, you would need to make sure that those changes are captured and deployed on your target. So I'm going to address both of these points in two sections because the tools that we can use for each and every section are a little bit different. So what can we use for the initial data sync? You already saw SQL Server Migration Assistant on the client side, and we touched briefly on the server side migration. So SSMA comes with an extension pack, which is not supported for all targets, especially Azure SQL DB, where we cannot create those jobs. How does it actually execute? You are going to deploy the extension pack that is going to create the required objects, tables, and jobs needed to transfer the data from your source to the target. Why would you go for a server-side migration? If you would like to bypass SSMA. So then this is going to be a direct connection between Oracle and SQL Server. On top of these two options, we also have Azure Data Factory copy activity, and I do encourage you to use it. It has some great features as in automatic partitioning, automatic data type mapping, and a lot of parts that you can configure and customize in terms of parallelism or the partition type that you may want to leverage during this data movement. SQL Server Integration Services, it's another data movement option, and this can be scripted from within SSMA. So the tool itself has the ability to generate these packages. If you want to optimize them, or if you want to update them post-generation, that is also possible. The output of SSMA is basically the definition of those packages. So you would need to run them on an environment where integration services is installed. Another option that has been used by our customer, and this one really depends on your familiarity with the technology or familiarity with the choice of with the area of Azure Databricks, that can also be used to do the data transfer between Oracle and your SQL or Azure SQL target. For customers who have petabytes of data, huge, large databases, we are looking rather at exporting that data, putting it in a data box, bring it in our data centers, and then ingest it from there. So if you have this huge, large amount of data sitting there in Oracle, that can definitely become an option. Now, what about the incremental data sync? So we've done, through either of the previous methods, we've done the initial data pump. Now we have to think about how we are going to bring the changes. And as I said, not all environments may need to have an online data movement solution / incremental / continuous sync. So here we are talking about really critical environments. And the area is not that vast. So on first-party tools, we have a CDC component in integration services that can be run either in on-prem or in Azure Data Factory integration runtime. It's the Attunity connector for Oracle. You can use Azure Databricks, or you can use third-party solutions as Attunity and Stream to to assure that the data, to bring actually the latest changes from your source to your target. That is one of the areas that we are looking at improving in the future. And we are looking at enabling customers in doing, let's say, a better incremental data sync and integration with the current solutions in the Oracle to SQL migration flow. So stay tuned, and we'll hope that maybe later this year we're going to bring some news in that space. We spent a lot of time and dedicated a lot of the demos on the database side. But as Neil said in the introduction, data platform is just one component of the story. In order to be successful and land a scenario, actually successfully migrate a scenario, you also have to think about applications. And when it comes to applications, we all know Java works well with Oracle, and we've seen a lot of that, but Java works well with SQL also. Customers may have different type of applications. We have customers that have OLTP workloads. I would actually create 3 categories. There are third-party applications where you rely heavily on the supported source and target from the third party. There are in-house or custom applications where you have access to the code and you can update the connection strings or update the APIs that you use to connect or send queries to the database. And there's also Oracle native applications. And here we are talking about ERPs, Oracle HCM, EPM, and other big solutions. For the last category, I would say it is quite challenging to migrate because the whole application in Oracle apps, everything has been written to work natively with Oracle. So you basically need either to replace the application or rewrite the application as well. The story changes when we talk about third-party or in-house developed apps. And in this section, we are working closely with our partners in ensuring that they do support SQL as a target. And most of them have different options for database support. We had one of our partners actually, or one of our ISVs that added support for SQL Server within their application. So that's an area where you have a little bit more flexibility. And when it comes to in-house developed applications, this is where you can work closely with your development team and also leverage our first-party tool in order to identify the areas in the code that would need to be updated. So what do I mean by first-party tool? Well, I'm talking about Data Access Migration Toolkit. It is a Visual Studio Code extension. It's available on the marketplace. It has been there for at least for the last 1.5 years to 2 years. And it is a tool that is designed to migrate application source code from one database platform to the other. In today's context, we talked a lot about Oracle, but besides Oracle, Data Access Migration Toolkit supports dialects as DB2 and SQL Server as well. How does it work? Well, it scans your entire repositories, so you can decide if you want to scan a file or the entire repository. And it's going to apply a pattern matching in order to identify data access APIs and what seems like a T-SQL syntax coming from within your code. What do you do with the output of that? Well, you can also, from the JSON, because the output of Data Access Migration Toolkit can be an HTML or a JSON. If you're going to go for the JSON, you can process those queries and feed them into SSMA for automatic conversion. Without any more details on the tool, I'm just going to show you how it actually works. So on the left side, I have a very simple Java application. It's just creating a connection string that is used to send a very simple query on the Oracle side. So there are a few things that we are using here. We are using the data access APIs for Java, and also we are using the Oracle data access APIs and specific to the Java driver, and we are also doing a dynamic PLSQL query. So this is basically my entire Java solution. So now I would like to understand what are the areas that I would need to change as part of a migration process to Azure SQL or SQL on-prem. So I'm just going to do Ctrl-Shift-P. And once you have the extension installed from Marketplace, you have three options: analyze the workspace, analyze the file, or of course, consult the help. Today, I'm going to analyze the entire workspace, and then I can choose the dialect. So these are the three dialects, the DB2, SQL Server, and Oracle. So you can use this also for SQL to SQL migration or DB2 to SQL migration. Today, we are focused on Oracle dialects. So it's pretty fast, but my code is not that big either. What do I have here? So I have the ability, first of all, to save this report. And these are the two options that I talked about. But I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. What I have here is the source folder information. Is it visible or shall I zoom in? Is the size of the text large enough?
It's large enough for me anyway, and no one else has said anything, so it should be good.
Okay, thank you, Ella. So I have the source folders, and then I have the languages and connectors being used. So see here, I can see that I have 3 files scanned. The JDBC theme client has been identified. I have 2 actions associated with that. And then I also have some plain text that have been analyzed together with some JSONs. So now I think I need to zoom in a little bit. So in the connection string, you'll see it already in the result summary, it picked up the connection strings that I'm using on my machine. So I have the JDBC Oracle theme client and all the files where this connection string has been used. So I have here a browsable file name together with the line of the file. So if I'm going to click on this one, it's just going to automatically take me to that file. Then I'm going to go to the next section, which is the data access APIs, where I'm looking for the prepare statement, and just make sure that the prepare statement works the same way in SQL Server, so you don't need to change or add certain parameters. And then the part which is very interesting is that I have the SQL queries, and this is where we do the pattern. This is where we do the pattern matching that I was talking about. So I have the high confidence query where I have more keywords in a certain order being matched from your code. And in the lower section, I have the low confidence query where I'm not pretty sure that that comes from like select focus, texter focus. This probably it's not a SQL query. So the confidence is low, medium, and high. And if I'm gonna save it, I can either save it as an HTML, but I'm gonna save it. Just let me take that. I'm just gonna save it as JSON. Okay. And I'm gonna look at the content of this file. So let's have a quick look here. And if I'm gonna look at this file, you'll see it has the file ID, the full path, the queries, the line number, column number, and confidence level that goes from 0.5 until 2. 2 are very confident, high confidence queries. And also for each of the file, we get the APIs that are being identified within those files together with the line number and column number. So you can really easily process all this information in PowerShell if you want to do that and integrate it with SSMA. So I also had I also created a script to do that, and if you have another deep dive session, I can show you how it can be done. Now, post-migration, there are things that we can do. So it's not done. You've moved the data, you've remediated the applications, but you also have to perform validation tests, and you also need to optimize the configuration of your target based on the queries and the workload coming from within your application. How can we help? Well, SSMA has a feature built in. It's called SSMA Tester that's used to validate migrated objects. So when we talk about migrated objects, we are thinking about tables, stored procedures, user-defined functions, view, and standalone statements. What does it mean, validation? For tables, it's doing a hash comparison between the initial value encountered in Oracle and the converted value in SQL Server. For the rest, is looking at the parameters, the input parameters, value of the parameters, the output data set, execution of the stored procedure, and comparison of the output data set. So for all the other objects except tables, we are also validating the output of the query or execution of that object together with parameters and values for those parameters. It's available in SSMA Oracle to SQL, and it's also available in SSMA Sybase to SQL. And one of the improvements that we've made is that we've moved the tester on the client side, and now you can run it against any Azure target as well. So you don't need to deploy anything in order to do this validation. And of course, we have to look towards the future. And I wanted to take a few minutes just to share and just show you briefly what we've done. We are thinking of implementing an end-to-end migration experience for Oracle. So our goal is to have you covered from discovery phase until cutover. And that's going to be done in several steps with a confirmation for each and every step. And the first step towards that direction is releasing a new extension called Database Schema Conversion Toolkit, available in Azure Data Studio. It's still in preview. It's brand new. That's able to run cross-platform, so you can install it both on Linux and Windows. And it gives you the ability to do source control and versioning. It has built-in IntelliSense if you want to remediate the converted queries post-conversion. And it's also really easy to use because it has integration with first-party tools as Visual Studio Code, and of course, the SQL project. Just to give you a sneak peek of the capabilities of the tool, I'm just going to switch to Azure Data Studio. Here I am. So you'll find it on the marketplace. If you're going to have a look, you'll find it on the marketplace. If you're going to look at schema, you have the Database Schema Conversion Toolkit. It has dependencies on other free extensions that we shipped together with the product. And basically what it gives you, you have the ability to connect from Azure Data Studio to Oracle, review and see the Oracle schemas in a tree structure, and of course, ability to initiate a conversion to SQL Server. Right now, we are supporting just tables, indexes, sequences, synonyms, and constraints. Later in the future, we are going to support procedure, functions, and so on. So the first part that you would need to do is to create a database project. So first of all, we need to create a new database project. I'm just going to put it a test demo web. I'm just going to add this one. Location for creation of my project. I'm just going to do my documents. Clicking on my documents, that's fine. Creation of my project. Okay. Azure Data Studio usually starts when it creates a new workspace for this project, and that is fine. And here I should be able to see my SQL project. And now I'm just refreshing my connection to Oracle, which should be pretty fast. Going to the schemas. I'm going to go to HR and then convert to Microsoft SQL. You can also do all schemas if you want to. I'm just going to make this one for today's demo. And then if you want, you can load the configuration file to handle certain conversion settings. We have it all documented. And once you're done, the conversion is going to start. This is going to take around, depending on the performance of the source, it should take around 40 seconds. And at the end of the conversion, the objects are going to be available in your SQL project. So what will happen here, you will be able to see those objects. So we are on top of these hours, So we strongly encourage you to test this extension, and of course, give us some feedback. We are interested in definitely improving it and adding more functionality to it. With that being said, me and Neil are still going to be online to take any other questions. I do believe that Oracle to Azure SQL, it is a modernization journey. It's not simple. We'll try to cover and support as much as we can through first-party tools, and of course, try to incorporate as much as your feedback. Thank you so much for your time today, and looking forward to hearing your questions.
We're nearly out of time, but someone did ask, is Data Access Migration Tool free?
Yes, it's free. All the tools that we showed today are free.
And then someone else asked, in terms of picking which SQL database to use, this person is beginner level. So they were wondering, would you recommend to go for the Azure SQL Managed Instance, or SQL Servers?
So I think, yeah, that's a very good question. And it depends also on the complexity of your workload and requirements of your Oracle workload. So in the choice of your target. So what we are trying to do is helping people to make a choice. So we are trying to work on some components that would facilitate that choice for them. I would say PaaS is a very flexible way because you have to reduce the administrative overhead. So if you don't have any constraints or hard requirements that would push you towards an on-prem environment, I would rather look at Azure SQL PaaS, which is SQL MI if it's critical for the IOPS and the performance, or Azure SQL DB for less important workloads.
Perfect. Well, we'll have to leave it on that one as we're just slightly over, but thank you both very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We're sorry for being over time. We know we have a lot of things to talk about, and thank you for having us today.
Great. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.